Okay. First, I'd like to say hello to everyone. There's quite a nice bunch of scientists and curious younger scientists. I'm glad to be able to share with you some of my experiences. I would start with the one general issue. I think that medicine and biology itself are quite complicated, rather complicated thing, which is the consequence of long billions of evolution. However, bringing new ideas into the world and bringing new discoveries or inventions is not so complicated at all, because all new inventions are usually a combination of old, well-known things. So I will just present you one of such invention, which is a combination of well-known biological facts and medical facts. I would like to, we all would like actually to answer certain questions. Why are we getting old at all? And the second one is, can we rejuvenate ourselves? Can we fight against getting old, against aging? Or even more, can we become immortal? So those are the questions the human race has been dealing for the last couple of thousand years. So I will explain certain points of that questions, and the last one will be at the end. This is the content I want to share with you. First one, what is the aging and why we die? This is probably well known to all of you. Then I will focus on the aging of immune system. Then I will explain or display what is the meaning of heterochronous autologous hematopoietic stem cell transplantation, which is actually the central topics of my speech. I will show you some studies which confirm that that methodology can be helpful in extending lifespan. And then I will very briefly show you the research of our team. If I start with what aging is and why we die, that has been said a lot about these topics. The aging actually starts in every cell and causes cellular derangements, which slowly develop into the malfunction of the whole tissues and organs, and that's followed by final diseases and death. That's a very general description of aging. And there have been many, many theories, more than 100 theories of aging in the last 100 years. I'm not going to go into the details, you know, and you have studied all of them. In the last couple decades, the most interesting or the most credible were the oxidative stress theory, which is based on the release of oxygen species which are harmful for the organism. And one of them is also the immunity inflammation theory, which also deserved much attention in the last couple of years. The aging has several phases, and as you will see probably in the lecture of Aubrey de Grey, which comes at 6 o'clock, he has about 20 years ago already given his 7 points theory, what is the damage type in the cells causing the aging. That 7 points were later multiplied, and you know, in the 2013, the famous circle consisting of 9 hallmarks of aging appeared in the Cell journal, and it's still very popular. However, when we studied these topics later on in several years, we came to some other points which are also causing the aging. So we developed a 15 points causes of cellular aging theory, because there are some additional ones which were not tackled in the 7 points or 13 points theory. But this is not so important, in fact, because all of them lead to the same conclusion, and this is aging and getting old. And what I will show you in the next slides will be that after aging affects every cell and reflects in various cellular pathways at the same time, it does not depend on the single molecule, and it does not depend on the single cellular pathway. It is multi-factorial instead. And if we observe the human organism as a whole, one can see that the most vulnerable organ in this aging process is actually the one which is the highest in evolutionary development. And in my opinion, there are 2 organ systems that are quite complicated and highest in the evolutionary development. One is the neural system, and probably even more prone to the evolutionary changes, and therefore the one which is still being developed is the immune system, because it is the target of everyday's influences of the surrounding pathogens, and it has to adapt permanently, which leads to further evolutionary development. So this is why the immune system is still the fastest developing organ system in the humans, or in animals, in the animal kingdom in general. It has been known for quite a long time that the age affects both the innate and the acquired immunity. And it also affects the stem cells, which are representing the pool, the reserve, which is producing every day new cells to complement both the innate and the acquired immune system. So let me very briefly explain the aging of immune system. It would demand, of course, a lot of explanation, but I would like to stress one fact, which is given by the National Center of Health. And the statistics from the 2012 in the US shows what are the main causes of death in the age group over 65 years. So the first group is, of course, diseases of the heart, which comes from the atherosclerosis problem. The number 2 killer is the cancer. The number 3 killer is the chronic lower respiratory diseases. The killer number 4 are cerebrovascular diseases like stroke. And then there come Alzheimer and diabetes. And then influenza and pneumonia. Accidents are on the 8th place. And then we have some other inflammatory diseases or chronic inflammations like nephritis, nephrotic syndrome, and nephrosis. And number 10 is septicemia. If you go into depth of those pathologies, you will realize that they are all caused by the immune system problems. If we start with the diseases of the heart and you do some research on atherosclerosis, it is usually started by a misbehavior of immune cells in the arterial wall. Those are macrophages, which deteriorate during the aging. And this is the starting point, and the deposition of fat and cholesterol is secondary issue. So the immune problem is actually the base of atherosclerosis and diseases of the cardiovascular system. And the cancer is actually developed in older ages due to the failure of immunosurveillance, as you will see later on. So the red causes of death here, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 9, and 10, are definitely highly relevant and connected and related to the failure of immune defense, to the failure of immune system. So what is actually going on in the immunity when we grow older? There is a huge list of defects which are taking place year by year. And if we just look into the particular immune cells like macrophages, there is a whole list of defects. There is a change of circulation numbers, a drop of molecules which are necessary for their function, the changes in the cytokine composition, changes in the membrane molecules which are governing the cell killing and similar, and the distinct drop of their function. And the story is very similar with other cells of the innate immunity. For the ones who do not deal with the biology in particular, the innate immunity represents the older type of immunity which developed in the early stages of evolution. But we as humans, we still have it, and it works quite well. It was later on complemented by an advanced immune system, which I will present a bit later. So the story in these basic 4 cells, which are macrophages, neutrophils, NK cells, and dendritic cells, is very similar. They all tend to deteriorate during the aging. And the story is not much different in the adaptive immunity. This, again, is the part of immunity that developed later on in our evolution. It started to develop during the fishes, and we inherited complete set of both the innate and adaptive immunity mechanisms. However, the cells of adaptive immunity, which are mostly the T cells and B cells, also share some age-related problems. For instance, they have a reduced function of B cells, and I will list the whole bunch of consequences. And there is also the diminished function of T cells, the helper T cells, cytotoxic T cells, Treg cells. And there is a certain involution of organs, immune organs like thymus, and also the factory of immune cells. The factory of immune cells is actually in our bone marrow. And bone marrow is producing hematopoietic stem cells, which are later on developed into all kinds of immune and blood cells. So all those cells I was talking about are actually prone to age-related deterioration. What are the consequences of such age-related issues? There is a long list of problems that are present in every of the cell mentioned, and I'm not going to go into that details. I hope this will be published and you can read it in many, many places. It would be easy, however, there are also clinical consequences of these defects, mostly chronic inflammation, impaired immunosurveillance of cancer cells, lowered responsiveness to vaccination, a compromised natural defense, and failures in autotolerance. This leads to the very well-known diseases which I have shown previously on the statistical records of US statistic from 2012, namely the atherosclerosis, malignant diseases as cancer, various forms of infections, various forms of autoimmune diseases such as rheumatism and so on, and to hematological diseases such as anemia, and all of them are much more common in the old age. And here I just wanted to remind you about the stem cells. They are residing in our bone marrow after we are born and during our adulthood. And one has to know that the whole repertoire of immune and blood cells derives from the original hematopoietic stem cells, which is dividing and differentiating into all kinds of immune cells and blood cells. So one has to keep that in mind, because what comes next is the composing the new things from the old things which are well known. And this is the so-called heterochronous autologous transplantation of hematopoietic stem cells. What is actually the stem cell transplantation? It started with the people who suffered from the atomic bomb irradiation, and they would die immediately if they did not get therapy with the allogeneic bone marrow transplantation. The donors are donating bone marrow in order to replenish the bone marrow of the victim, which is fatally irradiated. And this methodology is nowadays used to heal or treat cancer and many other hematological diseases. So we have on the left side is the donor who donates his bone marrow with the healthy stem cells to the patient who is affected, and this procedure replaces diseased stem cells, and the patient eventually gets healed. This procedure nowadays is no longer painful. It is made by apheresis, by a machinery which removes the hematopoietic stem cells from the peripheral blood of the donor. And the procedure is very popular. Every year, more than 50,000 bone marrow transplants are performed all over the world, and the procedure is very tolerable and it has very little side effects. So putting all the things together, one could conclude the following logical steps. if the immune system deteriorates with the age, and if the main causes of death in elderly are immune system related, which health for cancer, atherosclerosis, infections, and so forth. And if the immune system is actually completely reconstituted by transplantation of hematopoietic stem cells, especially if they are autologous, if they are given from the same person, maybe in his youth, and if the old immune system can be rejuvenated in this way with the so-called heterochronous autologous transplantation of hematopoietic stem cells, this logically leads to a conclusion that the immune-related aging decreased and the onset of age-related immune disorders will be delayed, which would at the same time extend the healthy lifespan. So it's a very simple logic, and we put together three old, long known parts of this invention, or let's call it therapy. So we presumed that the heterochronous autologous stem cell transplantation could restore one's immunity and extend this patient's lifespan, which would mean that a young person could give his own hematopoietic stem cells by means of apheresis and store it for a long, long time, let's say for 50 years or so. And when he gets older, and there is a definite danger of age-related problems of the immune system, those stem cells can be reinfused, which will then restore immunity and delay the onset of age-related diseases, which automatically brings about extension of lifespan. So this method is expected to extend the lifespan in case that the heterochronous autologous transplantation is performed during his 60s and 70s, because in normal nowadays human, we can expect that his healthy lifespan is about 70 years, and his average lifespan is 80 years. And during the last 10 years, we can expect an advent of age-related diseases and problems, not only in US, but in other developed countries. This methodology, the serial transplantation of young cells, is expected to extend the lifespan for about approximately 20 years. So how to prove that? Is that just a theory, or does it work? Let us put a look on some existing studies. In a few years ago, one group from Netherlands, that was 15 years ago actually, studied how the transplantation of young bone marrow extended, changed the normal aging. And they noticed that the animals who or which received young bone marrow experienced an extension of 10%. And they stopped this research afterwards. But there were some other documented studies For instance, the one from Texas, who were actually studying osteoporosis by transplanting young stem cells into the bone marrow and into the long bones. And it was a coincidental finding that the old mice who were treated that way also lived longer for 16%. And again, this group did not pay attention on this data. And another group by from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where they were studying the progeria. You know, it's a genetic disease of which causes an early aging in humans, but also in mice. And when they transplanted young stem cells to progeroid model of mice, they were able to extend their lifespan for 1/3. And here is another study from 2013 from a Russian group, where the transplantation of young bone marrow extended the relative lifespan for 39%. And that was the first, actually the first study which was focused on the lifespan extension. It was not published in a well-positioned journal, so we were trying to find some others. Here is another article of the Korean group in 2015, who were able to extend the lifespan for 1/3 and even improve the cognitive and physical functions in a model of rats. And they received human stem cells, which is very interesting and also can be a subject to problematic because the transplanting human cells to a rat might represent huge obstacles by the immune system. Last year, the Russian group published another article in Frontiers in Genetics, where they repeated the first experiment and confirmed the life extension by 28%. That was done in mice who received young bone marrow. And based on those data, we are now in our group, the Blood Transfusion Center, dealing with the same problem because we want to prove the principle. And our questions are, does the heterochronous autologous transplantation of stem cells really work in practice? Because it's hard to rely on those anecdotal reports and even the studies which are not really well designed. So we are trying to see whether that kind of transplantation will rejuvenate old immune system and whether the transplanted mice will live longer. In other words, if the old mice will be able to be rejuvenated by infusion of young hematopoietic stem cells and become better in health. And the next question is, of course, is that the same procedure feasible for humans? This is designed of our studies, which have been now performed in the last couple of years. We have the experimental group, which are old females mostly. We transplant them with the young donor bone marrow and then observe the immune system features compared to a control group which receives sham bone marrow transplantation. And what we expect is the statistically relevant differences in their immune system and shorter life. And we have, of course, also a control group which are serving for the standardization of our procedures. We are testing the immune system, we are testing the cognitive performances, and of course we check the cause of death and similar. The results will be published soon, I guess. I can just show you how the transplantation of old stem cells into the, how the transplantation of young cells looks like when you transplant them into an old stem cell niche. This is a recent photo of the electron scanning microscopy, and those small golf balls are the young hematopoietic stem cells which have been transplanted to the old niche. And this is another task which is ahead of us. We would like to, namely, to show it in a realistic view, not only in the chemical testing. So our current research is focused on the players in the hematopoietic stem cell niche, and there is a huge jungle and many participants there, so it's not an easy task to study the influence of old hematopoietic stem cell niche on the efficiency of stem cells in producing immune cells and in doing positive effect after the heterochronous autologous bone marrow transplantation. I can conclude that our methodology is probably feasible, and it could become a strategy for prevention of immune-related diseases in old age and for the extension of healthy lifespan. Second, it could even become a game changer in medicine in future. Therefore, the research should be continued. And now I owe you to fulfill one promise, which I promised, that I will answer whether we could become immortal through, and the answer is yes, we can become immortal through art, and that's the only way. And there is one girl here who was young and good looking. Then she started with the rejuvenation until she finally became immortal through art. This is a famous statue which is made here in her birthplace in Slovenia. This is our group. I would like to acknowledge them. There are quite many, many students, co-workers, and we are trying to develop further methodologies for preventing aging. And I will thank you for your being with me. Thank you very much.